Welcome to the podcast that puts a finger on the pulse of medicine and technology. On this show, you'll hear from investors, industry executives, and healthcare providers on the science and business of medicine. I'm your host, Omar Khateeb, and this is the State of MedTech.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the show. I have a very exciting show this week. I know what you're thinking. They're all exciting, but this one in particular because this guest that I have on, it's his very first podcast. It may be his only podcast. Who knows? I hope he continues to do more. And because of that, I want to make sure to honor this man's great history and his story, more importantly, because in the interview we cover so many different areas, but there's some areas of his story that I want to make sure to cover in this intro. So who's the guest? The guest is Jim Heath. Jim Heath was the former president over at Stryker. He was the president for their instruments division. And for those of you who are new to the industry, Stryker is a big, massive billion-dollar medtech company with a great history of innovation, of technology. And, I got to say, love them or hate them. I know a lot of people compete with Stryker. You got to respect how competitive they are. They have a great culture of competition, of extreme ownership, and I really appreciate that. And so the guest is Jim Heath. Now, Jim and I became friends through the wonders of LinkedIn many years ago, back in 2017, so almost 5 years ago now. And what happened was Jim had announced his retirement, and I had heard about Jim. So, being a young guy, I thought, hey, let me send him a message. I don't think he'll respond because, somebody at that level, they probably get hundreds, if not thousands of messages. So I sent him a message after he accepted my friend request. And I said, hey, I was curious in your life, what were the 3 most influential books you've read that set your foundation? If not books, mentors, or speakers, I'd really appreciate the insight. And he responded right away on June 3rd, 2017. I'm reading directly from LinkedIn. And he says, there are many books I really like, but a couple that really stuck with me are Team of Rivals, which is the story of Lincoln and managing the country during the Civil War, Truman by David McCullough, and Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. On the topic of mentors, find a few people you respect who will tell it to you straight and use them as mentors. Take care. So I took that advice. The one thing I recommend people do is that if you ask for advice from somebody, you look for mentorship, whatever they tell you, take action on it to honor it. So I took that advice. More specifically, one of the books he recommended, Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning. It's a short 130-page book. Definitely changed my life. It'll change yours if you buy it as well, because it's one of the top, I think, 25 must-read books of the 21st century. It's a really phenomenal book. And so since then, we never really kept in touch. But then since I started the podcast this year, I reached out to him over the summer and I said, hey, Jim, I've always wanted to have you on my podcast and interview you. Would you like to come on? And he responded right away and accepted, which is great. And of course, he said, I have a lot of new book recommendations as well. And so when we did our Zoom, I posted that Zoom on LinkedIn, sort of saying, hey, finally got to meet Jim Heath over Zoom. Excited to share that he's going to be coming on my show. And what happened next was really inspiring. And I post a lot on LinkedIn. I follow a lot of big names. When I posted that photo, I'm looking at it right now on my page, and I'm going to leave a link to this post in the show notes so you can go look at it yourself. The number of people who poured their hearts out commenting. This post has over 30,000 impressions at this point, and more specifically, 135 comments. 135, I mean long comments, not, oh, Jim's a great guy. People writing paragraphs about how this man, changed their lives, changed their careers, inspired them, And so I'm so honored and happy that he came on my show, and even more so that, not only I've developed a friendship with him, but he's a new reading buddy. So we've started to share some books, and I'm very grateful that somebody can actually keep up. If anything, I'm trying to keep up with him because now he's reading through a lot of great books. I always tell people, leaders are readers. So for all of you young professionals, start reading, because when you have the opportunity to connect with a leader like Jim Heath, you got to have some stuff to talk about, right? So before we get into the episode, I want to, let me read a little bit about his background for you. And it's very important you hear this. And one small note, when you listen to this episode, there are going to be times where you might think that Jim and I are talking over each other. That's not the case. It's because there is a little bit of a lag on the internet. And so that's what caused that delay. I did my best to fix it, but there's going to be some parts where it sounds like that. Just so you know, Jim and I are not talking over each other. So let's start with the first thing. If you go to Stryker.com and go to their management section, on their management section, Stryker shows thanks and appreciation for two people. One is Vivian Mason. The other one is Jim Heath. And here's what Stryker had to write about Jim Heath. Jim Heath, president of the Instruments Division, is retiring after 27 years of dedicated service. Mr. Heath began his career in 1988 as a sales trainer with instruments. Throughout his career, Mr. Heath progressed through a range of sales and general management roles, culminating in his appointment as president of the Instruments Division in 2008. During his 6-year tenure as president, the division's sales grew globally from approximately $1.2 billion to $1.8 billion. Side note, in case you've never worked at a company like Stryker, to move revenue from 1.2 to 1.8, almost 50% growth, that's remarkable. And that just doesn't happen just because of pure talent. You have to have a true servant leader who's able to leverage teams and get the best out of them. So continuing on. Mr. Heath led with humility, concern for others, a strong work ethic, and tremendous performance orientation. He built strong teams and stressed delivering results, but also emphasized the importance of family, health, and well-being, and active participation in the Kalamazoo community. His efforts leave our powerful Instruments Division well-positioned for continued success. Now, the last thing that I want to do is share even farther back a little bit about his history. And I hope he doesn't mind doing that, because Jim is really, as he says, he's a Midwest guy, so he's very much salt of the earth, very down to earth and very humble. But Jim, I'm sorry, I do want to cover this background on you. So before Stryker, this is Jim's history. Jim began his path at Kalamazoo College. He was a 1978 graduate with a bachelor's of arts in history. And he played football and earned letters all 4 years. He spent 7 years furthering his education, teaching at high school in Detroit and serving on football coaching staffs at Ohio State and New Mexico State. Side note, I found out later about the New Mexico State thing. New Mexico State is actually my university's arch nemesis and rival. I'm not going to hold that against Jim, but yes, he was their head football coach at one time. And then he returned to Kalamazoo at 1985. So for 3 years, he was the assistant professor and head coach of football and baseball teams at his alma mater, Kalamazoo College. In 1988, that's when he decided to join Stryker, where he rose up through the ranks in an illustrious 27-year career. He is married to his wonderful wife, Marcia, for over 31 years, and has two no longer college age. I think they might be college age, but I'm reading this bio from Kalamazoo's page. Two college age children who Carrie and Rob. And then he continues to give back and serve his Kalamazoo community. Last couple of notes, and we're going to get right into the episode. Reading from his Kalamazoo College page, his motivation. Jim's motivation is being around positive, energetic people, giving back to the Kalamazoo community, and watching people at Stryker succeed. Seeing his daughter and son succeed in their endeavors, and his wife doing amazing work with people who have special needs, staying fit and healthy. And Jim's very much into a lot of very interesting biking expeditions and trips. And the last thing is a question he was asked, which is, why is choosing your own path important? And Jim's answer is, you have to get out of bed every day enthused and engaged. Choosing your own path is essential if you want to achieve this ideal. Choose a path that allows you to make a difference in people's lives, the community, and allows you to grow as a person. So, I can't tell you how much I appreciate him coming on the show, and I'm so happy and excited to share this episode with the people at Stryker and, of course, the larger MedTech community who didn't get the luxury and honor to work with him, but you can learn so much from this episode. Finally, if you want to connect with him, and I'm going to leave his LinkedIn profile down in the show notes, and believe it or not, Jim Heath has a personal blog, which I encourage a lot of leaders to have. And I can't find any other way to describe this blog except this is very, I'd say very, very characteristic of Jim in the sense of how down to earth he is. And he has a great sense of humor. So his personal blog, which I'll plug in the show notes, is can be found at slowoldandstupid.wordpress.com. Jim, I love it. And so you can read some blogs from some of his adventures and personal experiences, doing biking trips and treks and different expeditions. So it's actually a fun blog. So with that being said, thank you for bearing with me on that long intro. I wanted to make sure that I cover it, but here's our episode with the great, the powerful, the humble Jim Heath. Enjoy. All right, and we're live. Are you ready for a really good introduction?
I can barely wait.
Like WWE Worldwide Wrestling introduction. Here we go. Welcome back, everybody. I know it's been a while. I know you've been dying to hear this episode. I made a post a few weeks ago about a good friend of mine who we met through the magic of the internet, and of course, somebody who's got quite a name and made quite an impression on many, many people. And so I'm very honored, excited, humbled to have the great, the powerful Jim Heath, former president of Stryker Instruments, on the show. Jim, thank you so much for joining me. I know you could be doing a lot of things today because you're retired now, you're taking it easy, but you decided to come and hang out with me.
Thank you.
I appreciate it. Absolutely. And for those of you in the audience who are listening, if you're a clinician, so if you're a surgeon who's listening, I got great news for you as well. This episode is actually eligible for a CME credit via your reflection, courtesy of our partners over at CMFI. And I have other good news. I've now decided to make all CME links for all our episodes free. So as a physician, you're listening to this. Once you finish listening, click the CME link down below. Go over to CMFI, write a couple of sentences to get a quick reflection. You pay nothing. I'll take care of the cost. And that way you get a CME credit for this, an AMA PRA Category 1 credit. So that's courtesy of our sponsors. So Jim, let's just get right into it. I'll tell the audience that the way you and I met, and actually I have it on my phone, was a few years ago. You had announced your retirement at Stryker, and I saw it and I had heard about you, and I said, let me send him a message. And I didn't think you would reply back. So a lot of execs, they get messages all the time. And so I said, yeah, here we go. June 2nd, which was my father's birthday, June 2nd, 2017. I said, hi, Jim. It's nice to connect with you. I read a lot of great things about you. I'm a young guy. I'm not a young guy anymore. I'm a young guy training to hopefully have a legacy that you've built for yourself. And I see you've had such a positive impact on people around you. I'm curious, in your life, what are 3 of the most influential books that you've read that set the foundation? And I didn't think I'd hear back from you. And you replied back, and people heard about this conversation. So they were curious, like, what were the books? So you replied back literally the next day, very quickly. You said, there are many books I really like, but a couple that stuck with me are Team of Rivals, which is a story of Lincoln managing the country during the Civil War, Truman by David McCullough, and Man's Search for Meaning for Viktor Frankl. Find a few people you respect who will tell it to you straight and use them as mentors. Best of luck. And of course, like I checked those books out, but Frankl's work had a tremendous impact on me. And so I owe you a bit of thanks for turning me on to that book. And a few years later, here we are talking. So, so I think a good place to start is, who is Jim Heath? Before Stryker, before everything, where did you grow up? Where are you from?
Yeah, well, I grew up in Detroit, in the northwest side of Detroit, and grew up brother and sister, parents, and just kind of everything happened within a few square blocks, grade school, high school, et cetera, et cetera. And so we lived there really almost entirely through my high through high school. My folks moved out north of Detroit, and then I went to Kalamazoo College, and this was in the mid '70s. I went to Kalamazoo College, and was a history major. Education. I was interested in pursuing education and coaching, and I played football there while I was going to K, and graduated from Kalamazoo College in the late '70s, and then I went back to Detroit and I taught school. I taught high school at a Catholic all boys school called Notre Dame. I was over on the east side, and was also a football coach. I was a wrestling coach, and kind of did it all there. And for a few years, really enjoyed it. I liked teaching, but I loved coaching. I loved the coaching part of it, and it just was just something I found a passion for. And so I decided that I was going to some way, somehow, see if I could finagle a way to get into college ranks somehow in some way. And at that time, this was early '80s, trying to get a graduate assistant's job. And I fortunately had a contact through Kalamazoo College of a guy who played there and coached there, but had also been at Ohio State. And I contacted him and asked him if there was if he had any contacts, and he knew one or two of the assistant coaches. He was there during the Woody Hayes era. For anybody remember that guy, the icon? So he was there. Well, Coach Hayes was there, but he knew a couple of the guys that were on with Coach Bruce, and reached out to him. And they get a lot of, as you would suspect, they get a lot of people that are making inquiries. And I just, once I got in contact with one of the coaches, and then I just was relentless. I didn't let up until they told me to stop calling them. And I went down there on my own. I went to their coach's clinic. I told them I'd work for free, which I did in the beginning. And so I was down there as kind of a freebie coach. And then they put me on as a graduate assistant, and paid for my master's, and I coached there for 2 years in 1981 and 1982, and it was probably the best thing, or the most about the whole experience, was that I met my wife, and we were in the very romantic graduate level statistics course, so that's where I met her. And so and I got a job after that. I got a job at New Mexico State down in Las Cruces. Coached football down there for a couple of years, right near your old stomping grounds in El Paso.
I'm just, I just have to call this out. Is it, you can be honest with me, Jim. Did you kind of hold that information back? Because, I invited you on the show. I publicly announced it. So, I had to keep my promise. You're probably like, I'll let him know later that I coached at his rival university. But that's okay. I'm not going to hold you against it, though.
Mm-hmm. Well, and UTEP beat us both years I was there. So that was, yeah.
Well, that's good, because I'll tell you that the UTEP football team this year is terrible. I think when they play New Mexico State, it's like the pillow fight bowl, because it's just like really bad football. Basketball teams, though, both of them are good.
Unfortunately, yeah, both are good, but the football program down there has not been very good. But anyway, so it was great. Never lived in the Southwest. And then I got a phone call from my alma mater, and the head coach had resigned a year before, and they had an interim coach, and they asked me if I would be interested in taking over the program. And this was in kind of the mid '80s, and my wife's father was lived in Pennsylvania, was not in great health, and so I really liked being in Division One and thought, that was going to be the trajectory. But things happen for a reason, and there was a bit of a reclamation project there at Kalamazoo, and I came back and I coached at Kalamazoo College for 3 years. I was the football coach. I was the baseball coach for 1 year, and taught a few classes, and we had our first child the third year I was there, and I had to make a decision because I was piling up a lot of hours, and I had watched a lot of guys in my shoes who had either just had non-existent family lives or just bad marriages, and I knew it was just I wasn't going to get a bunch of assistant coaches or a bunch of money at a small Division III school, and I knew what kind of that I wasn't going to let off. So a good friend of mine, who was a very, very dear friend of mine, and mentor Cy Johnson, who was has a great legacy at Stryker, had spoken to me. Yeah, he was one of the top guys in the corporation for many, many years. So great friends. We went to school together, and he said, "Hey, would you ever think about doing something other than football?" And long story short, I sat down with him, and I made probably one of the hardest decisions I ever made in my life at that time, which was to leave coaching, and I went to work for Stryker in a training capacity in the late '80s. But it was a very, very difficult decision to leave.
How old were you when you made that decision?
I was 32.
Yeah, so let me ask you this, because for a lot of young and aspiring professionals, especially when you're a 32-year-old guy, you just got married, there's a little bit of an ego there that it's like, like you're quitting, right? And of course, I would imagine that, for every guy, like to be a head football coach, whether it's college or high school or anything, is is a dream. What made the decision so difficult, and what influenced that decision?
Well, the first thing, Omar, was that I loved the sport. I mean, I loved coaching the kids. It was a ton of fun. I mean, being on the field and I loved practice. I mean, most players don't like practice, but I loved practice because it gave us a chance to experiment with some things. And we were finally getting, when I got to K, the first year there, they had 42 guys on the roster, so it was a little lean. But when we left, we had over 90. We were starting 16, 17 freshmen, but we were getting better players, and we were starting to be able to compete a little bit. And so that was the difficult thing, because we had brought in all these young kids, and who had placed faith in me and faith in our staff, and then I was bringing them into a room and telling them I was leaving. That was really tough. Because I loved them, and I loved the just the thrill of being part of a football program like that. But it was the right thing to do for my family, because I was really afraid that I was going to get caught up in that 90 to 100 hour a week thing, that you're in Division III, you're constantly recruiting. You're it. It's literally 365 days out of the year.
Yeah, because it's not like you're getting people throwing themselves at you like if you're at the University of Michigan or something. So you're constantly having to grind. I never realized that, but you're right. In D3, you have to just,
you gotta be on it. That's
technically. Would you say that was your first sales job? Technically,
it was. You're trying to sell a pretty expensive college, liberal arts college, to a bunch of fickle 17-year-olds and their parents, and that this is the right thing to do, and especially because the program had not had a lot of success over the past 6-7 years, and so that was another leap of faith for these kids. So that was the first big sales job.
What was the biggest thing that you learned, leaving your career as a college football coach?
I learned as much as anything that you really need to adapt to your personnel as much as anything. I came in with the Ohio State offense and the Ohio State defense, which had won Big Ten championships, and you learn, you have a kind of a mindset or a philosophy when you come in to a program. But at Kalamazoo College, where we had very, very different kinds of players, and we hadn't had a lot of success, and we weren't getting the types of kids that some of the other programs were. We had to get very creative, and we had to adapt to our personnel, and regardless of whatever philosophy that I had or any of the other guys that are on the staff had, we had to adapt to our personnel if we were going to compete and we were going to win. And you have to get out there, which means you have to learn and go to other schools and adapt so that you give these guys a chance to win.
Makes a lot of sense. So you leave college football, and of course, like at the time, like very tough decision, definitely the right one. You were in contact, so you knew Cy Johnson before you were at Stryker.
Mm-hmm. I did. Yeah, we went to college together. We graduated together.
Got it. What did he tell you that convinced you to go over to Stryker? Because at this point, like if you're leaving college football, you have to be very careful about the choice you made, right? What did he tell you that convinced you to do that?
Well, Cy and I had similar career paths, Omar, because he was in college baseball. He was, and he went through a sports management program at Ohio University. I went through the sports management program at Ohio State. So, and he was on the baseball staff and thought he was going to either go be a college baseball coach or he was going to become a college administrator of some kind. And kind of through a long story, ended up at Stryker as an entry-level salesperson. So I knew him. He was a very good friend of mine. We had similar career paths, and he said, listen, when you come to the Stryker, and it was it was much smaller at that time. It was the mid to late '80s, and he said, this is it's a great place because the people here, they want to win, they expect to win, and they will give you the resources to go out there and to win. And you may love the feeling that you get on a Saturday afternoon for a football game, but here you kind of have that every month, every day. You're there competing to win and try to beat your. The big competitor at that time for Stryker was Zimmer, still is, but that was so we're kind of anybody who's Zimmer folks, I love you. Don't worry. This is, but it was weird. They were trying to do the same thing to us. Yeah.
We welcome that. Hey, for me personally, especially in the worlds of orthopedics, but just medical sales in general, I see it very similar to competition, sports, and things. So we welcome all kinds of trash talk on this show. That's totally okay. That just because you're retired, that doesn't mean that rivalry's gone. So please, by all means, the Stryker crowd will enjoy it.
Yeah. Well, my daughter works at Stryker, and my son just left Stryker, so I had two at Stryker. But I always told him, I said, "Listen, guys, go out there." But I said, you can't go to work for Zimmer. And Dad just wouldn't be able to handle that one.
Yeah, you're gonna lose all your friends overnight. It's like a house divided, So, what was I'm gonna, I didn't tell you I was gonna do this, but now that we're recording, you got to give us some war stories from the trenches in terms of the rivalry between Stryker and Zimmer. You got to give us at least one, because I know if I don't ask you that question, people are gonna message and be like, "Why didn't you ask him about that?"
Well, yeah, I mean it would Zimmer was the dominant force. I was there and started in 1988, and they were the dominant. They were the powerhouse in orthopedics and orthopedic power tools, and that's the instruments division, which you mentioned earlier. At that time, it's called surgical. So there was the surgical business, which was a combination of power tools and what is now endoscopy. So that was surgical. Then they had the medical business, which was the bed and stretchers, and then they had osteonics, which was the hip and knee business out in New Jersey. And they had a physical therapy business as well down in Memphis. But in the power tool world, where I was in Kalamazoo, Hall Surgical and Zimmer, they were the dominant force. They had big market shares. And then actually, Cy Johnson played a instrumental role in coming up with battery-powered orthopedic tools for large bone arthroplasty. And Cy was the marketing director that brought those to. So the old OP90s, big, it looked like a sledgehammer back then. But that really changed the landscape for orthopedics, but also for Stryker. That it really started to change the dynamic between Stryker and Zimmer. I mean, it was a very healthy rivalry, and still is. But that was a big change, and then there were other products that started to get put into that orthopedic total joint mix, and it worked.
Would you say that the introduction of the battery powered tools, that's kind of what gave the competitive edge to Stryker to sort of level up?
Amen. 100%. Yeah. I mean, it's Stryker, I think, is on their 9th iteration, maybe right now. They're smaller, they're faster, they're more powerful, they're quieter, they're this, that, the batteries last long. I mean, it revolutionized that whole power tool business, and now they can do batteries for small bone instruments as well. So yeah, that really changed the landscape.
Wow. I mean, I'm not a surgeon, but I can tell you that when I was running surgical labs in robotic spine, I hated when I had to use a drill that was not a Stryker. Like, I actually, in my marketing budget, you just brought me back. I completely forgot about this. I either reached out to somebody at Stryker, or I just went on the site somewhere and bought them. But I pulled out budget just to buy Stryker drills because they were just. I was just like, it's worth the money. Like, these other ones are terrible,
We were fortunate. We had wonderful engineers that knew that business backwards and forwards, and were real innovators, and still do. They really have done a great job there.
You mentioned, and again, this is part of the reason why my audience loves when I interview a leader like you. And personally, this is one of my goals is documenting this history, because it's not really written down anywhere. But you mentioned a company called Hall Surgical. So what happened to Hall Surgical? Because a lot of younger professionals have never heard that name.
Well, Hall was part of Zimmer. So the Hall was the kind of the power tool side of Zimmer. Zimmer was the real their bread and butter were hips and knees, and Hall Surgical was the power tool side of that business. So they had both the large bone, large bone, and then the small bone stuff for doing extremities.
Got it. So in starting at Stryker, you started off like in the sales and training department, correct? For me, my career really sort of took off when I went into marketing, focused on the commercial side. But I cut my teeth in carrying the bag on the sales and training side, because it's so valuable, right? The art of like training surgeons and everything for some of the younger like people who are in like education and training. Like, what's some of your advice to them in terms of how do you become a world-class trainer?
Well, I think you steal liberally from others. That's one thing. Find people who are doing it really really well, and take some of those things that they're doing well and integrate it into your program. But again, to make sure that it fits with the type of reps that you have and the type of culture that you have. Stryker's sales culture was one, Omar, that was really, we gave these guys a lot of independence. They really they had a regional manager and regional sales manager like most organizations, but they got a lot of independence. We gave them lots of freedom to kind of run the railroad the way they wanted to, but the expectations and the accountability was also very high. So we wanted to, back then, we wanted to make sure that they were proficient in all the products, proficient on the call pattern. But most of the guys and gals, and I'm going to use guys, so nobody take offense to this, but I'm a Midwestern guy, and that guys just kind of interchangeable, male or female here in the Midwest. That
I'm a younger guy from down south, and it's the same thing down there. When we say guys, like yeah.
But the individuals that we were hiring, most of them were coming out. Well, at that time, most of them were coming out of med device in some way, shape, or form. That changed pretty significantly once we got into the 90s, and we made some changes with our philosophy, and we wanted to hire great independent salespeople who had good track records of success and service, as opposed to just hiring somebody who had 5 to 10 years of med device experience. So so there was this whole independence thing, but from the training standpoint, we were focused pretty much on products and a little bit on the negotiation part of it. That has changed significantly over time, and rightfully so. There's still the product. You need to know the products, but you need the way that the hospitals and GPOs are set up today. You need to have higher level negotiating skills and be able to use technology better, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that's changed quite a bit.
No, and that makes sense too, because even today, I mean, and for a lot of the younger salespeople, and even not so young, the reason why we have this term "carry the bag," because there was a time where you literally carry the bag. You just go to the surgeon's lounge, open the bag up, be like, "Hey, what do you want to try?" And they go, "Use it." Those things change, so it's not enough just to have a really cool, shiny technology. Even if the technology has all this clinical backing that shows it's better, it's just not enough. The game changed, right? So Stryker got ahead of that and changed in the 90s, which explains a lot of there's a certain profile and personality type and characteristics they hire for the sales team,
Right. Mm-hmm. It was straight commission. We didn't pay expenses. There were no cars. There was Zippo, but we we supported the heck out of all the folks that were out there in the field. And if somebody was making more than the vice president, we were cheering them on. That was great. We wanted to make this into, well, one of my old bosses used to call it salesman's paradise, and that was really what they tried to do, is to give you great products, give you support, give you an uncapped commission program, and let you go. And it worked.
Wow. That was real. You eat what you kill, literally. Yeah. So when you were there, you started off again in sales training. what was the first big, I don't want to call it a promotion, but what was the thing that kind of stepped up your career that really started giving you traction? Like what was that moment? What exactly happened?
Yeah. Well, we were a much, much smaller organization back then. It was publicly traded, and things had gone pretty well, but we were. I'll just give you a little bit of context here. So, at the end of 1988, the first year I was there, the surgical business, which is now Stryker Instruments, which has got a bunch of subsets, and Stryker Endoscopy, which also has a bunch of subsets. We did $49 million in 1988. So that surgical business did $49 million, which is about what Instruments does probably in a couple days or something. I mean, it was so. With all the with all the different they parsed out the neural portion of it, interventional spine navigation, etc., etc. So yeah, it was a much smaller organization. So movement there just weren't that as many people. Number one, you were highly visible, so if you were doing a good job, people would notice and you'd move, and if you weren't, you were probably going to find another job someplace. And that was a time when we were trying to grow primarily, or it was primarily organic growth. So new products and this type of thing. But we did make an acquisition into our small bone power line for because we were servicing oral surgeons, and we bought a dental implant, which that used to permanent tooth replacement with these titanium implants. And we bought a small company out of Columbus, and I was put in charge of that small business to kind of grow it and use it in conjunction with our small power tools. So I did that for about 3 years, I think, if I'm not mistaken. So that was the first promotion, and then I went from there to Steve's.
What made you get promoted though? Because not everybody gets promoted once you're in med device. It happens. It's hard. It's a tough industry no matter what role you're in. What did you specifically do that you think allowed leadership to say we should promote this guy?
Well, I don't. I'd love to tell you. I came up with some new whiz bang product, but that wasn't the case. I mean, I was the training manager, but I believe that a number of the folks that I worked with, and the folks who, and a lot of the sales managers that I was interacting with, I think they had respect for what I was doing, what I was trying to do, and thought that I was just trying to make people better. I think as a trainer, I think your job is to try and somehow, some way, give these folks a foundation so that they can go out there and be successful. But to follow up with them, not just have the class and wave goodbye. I mean, but I did. I followed up with all these with all these folks. I would get in the car, I'd ride with them, because it helped me learn as much as anything, but learn what they're doing, and then you could ask them some questions. Have you ever thought about this? And hey, did you know this guy over here in Wisconsin has really been doing great things by using these techniques, and kind of sharing this back and forth. And so I became a resource, I guess, is what I'm saying, and maybe that had something to do with it. But like I said, it was a much smaller organization, so there was no place to hide. Yeah.
Got it. Well, something I made a note of. So like while we speak, I'm making some notes. But what I find interesting, and I think this is something that, for younger professionals, if they're able to not only figure this out, but have the right mentors around them to point out what they're really good at. Because sometimes we're under our own illusions as to what we're good at, and we need someone outside to say, no, you're actually really good at these things. You mentioned in when you were a coach, what you really loved doing was you loved to practice, and specifically you said you love to experiment. And it sounds like you translated that love for practice and coaching and training and experimenting with new things and brought it over to your role at Stryker. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think that's fair. I Gallup has been a big part of Stryker's culture for many years. Actually, they brought Gallup in the second year I was there as a kind of a consulting arm, and for hiring and for development and engagement and those types of things. And so we all went through the Gallup Strengths Finder. My number one strength is individualization. So which is really kind of the whole idea behind treating everybody as something unique, and not trying to group people, and one size fits all. And I so maybe that has something to do with it. I don't know. That is something I take looking at people individually, and how are you going to kind of customize, whether it's coaching, training, whatever it might be, to that individual, because not everybody learns the same way. Not everybody, everybody's different. So treat them as such.
Absolutely. No, absolutely. And I'm happy you mentioned that. I mean, for me, as you know, and a lot of audience knows, I have my own program called the Medical Sales Network Effects Program. And, there's an online course, but just in the last 5 months, I've had to evolve it because I've realized that everybody has different needs. So, it's all individual modules you watch online. But then I said, some people need one-on-one help. So we introduced group coaching. And I think that whether you're a trainer or any leader could benefit a lot from your advice earlier, which is like, you don't just train people and like let them loose. Like there's follow-up involved. It's continuing education. And it's something that I personally hope to kind of bring back, to our industry, because, I'm a young guy, but even I remember there's a time specifically like in the 80s and 90s, if you're a salesperson, there is a budget, your own personal budget set aside where you're going to go to the latest sales seminar, whether it was like Jim Rohn or Zig Ziglar or Brian Tracy or something. And it's like it's an art, it's a craft. You constantly invest in. For some reason, with my generation, the generations below me, that seems to not be there, and the onus feels like, oh, my company will train me, and not every company is a Stryker, by the way, And so I think there's this combination between leadership having to take that responsibility on, but also the individual to say, I can rely on the company so much, but what am I going to do on my own to further my education, further my skill sets,
Yeah. Well, and the thing is, today you also have, if you've got a highly motivated person sitting in that sales seat, there are, through technology and social media and internet, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, there are all sorts of different resources that you can tap into, like you, for instance, and that's fantastic. Back in the late '80s, when I was running this thing, I did a newsletter, which they thought was remarkable. I'm not
Really?
yeah, I did this. I put this newsletter together every month, and we had kind of stack ranked everybody, and it was recognition, and but then there was this whole thing of sales tips that I would collect from different folks across the country, and put those in there. And but like I said, the technology was a little different back then. There was no cell phones. We just got voicemail.
And all paper.
Yeah, everything was paper.
Yeah, I mean it's amazing. I'll tell you, like you're an internet marketer before the advent of the internet, because like that's like the big thing now. I mean, it's been like that for many years, which is like putting tips in for sales or marketing to an email newsletter. But that's amazing that you did this back then.
Well, players learn best from other players. That's what I learned that in college. I mean, that players learn best from other players because they're playing the game, and the coach can say all he wants, but he's not playing the game. The guys out in the field are playing it, so they're often the best coaches.
Oh, absolutely. I don't know if you do, but if you find any one of those newsletters, you got to promise you either you're going to take a photo of it and post it on LinkedIn, or just mail. You know, we exchange addresses. Mail it to me. I will digitize that, and that's you got to find one of those. You just have to find one of those. You know,
Have to do a little digging.
so from the 90s 2000s, I know that you served in different roles, and you became president of the instruments division right in 2008, correct?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
What were you doing before you became president? Because there are people who are at Stryker and other places where they say, my goal is I want to be the president of the division. So many things have to happen and go right for that to happen, right? It's not enough just to be good. What did you do?
My goal was, when people ask me and say, well, what were your career aspirations and so on and so forth, and I tell them, and I think I disappoint a lot of folks, because I tell them that I never had a 5-year plan or a 10-year plan, or my plan was that whatever was put in front of me, that I was going to try and make it the very best that I possibly could, and try and set it up for the next person who may come in there, if there was going to be a next person. And I just knew, just the type of place the Stryker was, or is, that if I didn't do a good job in whatever role I had, there wasn't going to be another whatever. It was going to be, you do a great job here, make it great, make it an integral part of the whole success story. And that was it. I really didn't. I had no aspirations of I was going to be the president. As a matter of fact, that was not even in the picture for me. I just wanted to do a really good job at every different thing. And for me, what gave me the biggest kick was the anything that wasn't necessarily a smooth running ship. I kind of liked those challenges more than anything else, was to have a chance to try and take something that might be a little bit broken and try to repair it.
Interesting. I think that's really good advice, Jim, just because, and again, I'll speak for people my age and younger. I've noticed that everyone wants success, which there's nothing wrong with that. But they want it in like a shorter amount of time. A lot of people are super impatient. And I mean, I do my best to mentor as many people as I can. But I was speaking to somebody earlier this week. The guy's he's 24, and he's I think interviewing with a few medtech companies for a sales role, and he jumped right away and said, yeah, he's like, if I get this role at this company, then maybe in a couple of years I can get promoted. I'll be at this level, I'll make this much money. And I stopped him. I said, listen, stop what you're saying right now. I said, you're already thinking way past. I said, when you're given that role, all you need to focus on, not how much money you're making, not any of these things. Focus on being the absolute best, like undeniably the best. Like, you can't even be ignored. And if you do the work and you're patient, everything else will follow. And I think a lot of people, I mean, they're in a role for like a year. Okay, great. If you knock it out of the park, a year is nothing. What are you going to accomplish in a year? And I'm coming from the startup world where you do a lot in a year,
Mm-hmm. People start tapping their foot, and then they start to make bad decisions because they're so focused on moving up and so on. The thing about Stryker is that the best reps there are making more than any of the executives oftentimes. So it wasn't necessarily a money thing. And to be honest with you, Omar, I really, the title stuff was very nice and so on. But I mean, to be honest with you, when I got into the president seat, nobody cared. I'll be brutally honest with you. I mean, at our place, I mean, oh, here's the president. You know what? the only thing they cared about is that I cared, and our team cared about them, and that we were trying to do something special for our patients, and we were trying to take care of our customers. They didn't. I They really didn't care. I mean, I'd go out with our reps. I'd go out with our sales reps, and I'd say, when you introduce me, just introduce me as Jim from Kalamazoo. He's riding with me today. And I said, if you're in trouble, and or the company's in trouble, then you can pull out the title thing and let them, beat me up a little bit. But I just think people get they get focused on the wrong stuff. What are you trying to get at? What's your personal purpose and mission, and make that the thing that is most important. And if you move forward in really good organizations, they'll see whether you have the chops to be able to do it. The interesting thing too, I think, with sales, especially with salespeople, is great salespeople do not necessarily make great sales managers. A lot of great salespeople, and I've been really, really lucky to be around some unbelievable sales folks. And you know, and we back in the older days, we'd say, oh, we got to move so and so into sales management, and we would do it, and it would be just an absolute disaster because they wanted everybody to kind of do it the way they did it, and they wanted everybody, and they couldn't understand how but they could manage themselves great, but they couldn't manage a bunch of other people, and we just found out that those two things didn't go hand in hand, and we made it. You could be a salesperson and build a beautiful career at Stryker as a salesperson and live happily ever after, and not move into the management ranks.
Yeah, and since you so I am a big fan of football, specifically college and high school football. I just I love the sport. But I wonder if you'll agree with this analogy. And if I'm wrong, you tell me. But I agree wholeheartedly that a lot of times that companies make the mistake often. It's like, this person's really good at sales. Well, if we elevate them to a leadership role, everybody else will become great. And I feel like the sales leadership role, like finding a great sales director or manager, VP, is equivalent to the difficulty in drafting a top QB or quarterback out of college, in the sense that on paper, there's all these things like, oh yeah, they're going to do great. And then they get into the NFL and they just flounder. I mean, how many top QBs went to the NFL? We're like, they're going to kill it. They last a year or two. Then you have Tom Brady, who literally in his 20s had like 40-year-old dad bod. He looked terrible. He looked so clumsy, and he's one of the greatest of all time. Would you agree with that analogy?
Yeah, I think there's some correlation there. I think that's you have to look at a variety of different things, and I mentioned Gallup, and frankly, Gallup taught me and many others this thing that you don't judge a book by its cover.
I totally agree.
You have to peel. I'm using all these all these cliches, but peel the onion back. I mean, really to look at the individual, because there's times when somebody would come in and they'd have a mustard stain on their shirt, and okay, well, he's out, and instead of realizing what is true talent, and how does that person going to be able to interact with others on the team, if it's a team type of role. How are they going to be able to interact with the customers? Do they have a penchant for being a great service person? Which, if you're not a great I contend if you're not a great service person, you are going to struggle mightily in these larger, or probably any sales role, but especially these high paying med device roles. And you've got to be able to get 2 o'clock in the morning. You got to run a part over to somebody who's got a trauma case. You better do it. So I mean, there's all of those things that you have to that you have to be able to understand, and not just somebody who looks pretty in the or like they just came off a cover of a magazine. That's not going to cut it.
No, I totally agree. And then look, I mean, for me, the years that I spent in Silicon Valley, the sort of equivalent to that, and I learned it the hard way, is that, you get these resumes sometimes, people that spend time at Google, at Facebook, top tier companies. And so you kind of get enamored and almost, mystified by like, oh man, this person's going to be great. Like this gal who came from here is going to be wonderful. And I learned that has become like a red flag for me to immediately dig deeper and be like, okay, well, let's pretend I strip all this away. Like, is this person really that good? And I hate to say it, in my anecdotal experience, 90% of the time, I have not met somebody with, again, top Ivy League MBA, came out of a tech company, et cetera, where they backed it up. It's always been somebody who on paper, they look okay. Then I talk to the person, I say, wow, this person is on another level. This person is going to be a star, right? What do you think? You mentioned like qualities, like if you were to narrow it down, and this is tough, but like 3 qualities to what makes a great sales leader, somebody who, let's say they're okay at sales, but there's something in them where you're like, if they have these 3 qualities, then that's somebody worth at least looking more into, that might be good for sales management. What do those qualities look like to you?
Yeah, I think as much as anything, they have to want to see others to win. When you're in a sales role, you want to win. Because that's why you're in it. You're in sales. I want to see my name at the top of the leaderboard. I want to beat everybody else. I want to beat the competitor. Which is lovely. That's what you want. In a management role, you have to, that's just, people have egos, and so I understand you'd like to, but you want to see everybody on your team win and be really happy and be just a cog in the wheel as opposed to being the wheel. I think that's really important for any sales manager. And then I think, are they able to individually put together a plan for each one of the people without being intrusive, without saying, okay, listen, here I was a great sales guy and just do what I do. Mm-mm. You've got to be able to say, take them where they are in their career, and what 1 or 2 things or little thing can you bring to the party that can help them out. And maybe it's somebody else on your team that can bring it out, but and I think that's important. And I think, as much as anything, whether it starts, Omar, with, do they know that you care? And I know that sounds maybe a little squishy, but I will tell you, if people know that you care about them, they'll go to the mat. They'll go to the mat for you. If they know you care, they know that you are more than just a guy who just, all right, bring me your numbers, and if they know that you care about them as an individual, I think they will respond accordingly. I believe that in my heart of hearts.
No, look, I completely agree. For me, I'm into tough things. I do jujitsu. I like football and everything. But when it comes to leading people, I completely agree. And again, one of the great sales leaders in our industry, specifically in the robotics world, my late mentor, Chris Sells, who sadly passed away a couple years ago, he came from US Surgical. That's a tough organization. Early class at Intuitive. I mean, at Intuitive, for those who are listening, when you joined Intuitive in the 2000s, training was 5 weeks, which was included in your quarter. So if you started the quarter training, 5 weeks is training. If you didn't hit your number that quarter, you get canned next quarter. That's it. So really tough organizations. His number one talent was bringing out the best in people and making them feel that they were deeply appreciated and cared for in the organization. And I think that's part of being a great coach, because people want to feel that they matter, that if they left, they would be missed. That's what develops loyalty. Because if you don't do that, that's when you end up with people who, don't have the organization's best interests at heart, and they'll do things that hurt the organization, you know?
Well, and I mean, it goes without saying, kind of to your point, it goes without saying that as a sales manager, you have to be able to bring in great talent, and it's going to look different. It's going to be all over the map, but you have to be able to bring in great talent and be very comfortable with being uncomfortable, because you're going to be surrounded by a lot of people, and some of them are going to be these hard chargers, some are going to be a little softer, and you've got to be able, if they've got the ability and the talent, and they're going to service people and all these kinds of things, you as a manager have got to be able to to manage. If you're really good at it, you got to be able to manage that whole array of people, realizing that it starts there with talent, and then your ability as a manager to help to cultivate that and to get that into something that's that's going to help them be successful and produce is I think where the really good ones separate themselves from the others.
Absolutely. What, kind of going back to your division 3 days when you're having to literally go and recruit people. Something I'm wondering what your thoughts are. Something I don't like that I see very often in our industry, specifically in the startup world, which is a sales leader develops a relationship with like a sales team. They trust each other. They like the way they work. They go to another company and they just say, hey, I'm bringing this team with me. And some of those individuals might be great, but they're not all the best for that company at that time with that product. And I've seen so many where it seems like 50% or more of the people they say, hey, we're bringing these people over, they don't work out. And I feel like there's a lack of, I don't want to say it's lazy, but a lack of thoroughness when it comes to sales leaders say, hey, I think some of these people will be good, but we got to be, let's do the recruiting process and try and recruit the absolute best and find people who we have to convince to quit their jobs to come work for us. What's your thoughts on a sales leader's talent to recruiting, and not just recruiting the people you've worked with in the last 2 or 3 companies?
Yeah, it's arguably one of the most important things that you do is to bring in, is to recruit, hire, and retain great people. If you can't do that, I don't care. You could walk on water as a manager or as a leader, and if you don't have great people around you, you're cooked. Because if you think you're going to do it all by yourself, you're sadly mistaken. And being able to do that, and I think that as my career evolved, and as I watched the Stryker evolve and get bigger and more diversified, they made the hiring process very, very robust, almost to the point of.
Yes, I went through the hiring process there too one time. I remember it.
I mean, it was, but it was done for a reason, because it's not a place for everybody. And that doesn't mean that everybody, I mean, that the people who didn't get in aren't really, really, really good. It just meant, you into this culture and for what we need and everything, we are going to put you through a real, a lot of due diligence is going to be put into looking at how you're going to fit. You're going to meet with a variety of people. You're going to do presentations, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I think it's the right thing to do. And it's timely and it's expensive and so on. But I tell you, if you lay that against just bringing in, like as you were mentioning, bringing in a bunch of people that you knew from a past life or somebody's buddy or that kind of thing, boy, I'd rather have the former than the latter, because I've watched the program, the robust, and you're still going to make mistakes, but the mistakes you're going to make are going to be minimized, and I'm telling you, you're going to have a much better chance of success.
I totally agree. I mean, look, and you're right. Doing these things, it is expensive. It does take time, but you know what's more expensive than that? Hiring the wrong person, wasting, let's say you're lucky and you get them out in a quarter, which never happens, by the way. Let's just say you get them out in a quarter. You've now wasted 3 months of time, which you don't get the time back, and you've wasted training hours and all this investment, and now you have a gap. That's way worse, you know? And I feel like, I don't know why more CEOs and sales leaders don't think of it like that, versus like, hey, we're going to hire and just kind of let people. The other thing that drives me nuts is people hiring salespeople for their book of business. I get it that sometimes that works, but in this day and age, like, we're not in the 80s and 90s anymore. It is a much more complicated sale than that, you know?
I agree, 100%. I agree with you, and yeah, it's key to success. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it.
Absolutely. Now, I want to do a time check with you. You're on a roll, and I love it. Can we hold you on a little bit longer?
Sure.
It's a Friday. You're having a good time.
Right, Friday. I'm retired, so I'm
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly right.
And I already did my bike ride, so I'm good.
Yeah, you know what? That's a good small like sidebar I want to ask you about. But you know, for me, I look at every executive, especially, and again, I think every executive is like this, but I'm a sales and marketing guy, so that's what I can speak to. I see being an executive just like being a professional athlete, which means it's not enough just to be really good at the job. You have to optimize your what you're eating, the way you're sleeping, your exercise, because when you're having to take on an immense amount of stress, like running a multi-billion-dollar division, these things matter. So how did you keep up, balance like family life with taking care of yourself while running a billion-dollar division at Stryker?
I'm not going to lie to you. It's difficult. I mean, you're anybody that tells you that they've got work-life balance figured out. I want to meet them. I want to meet them because it's difficult. I Yeah. I love I I've got a wonderful family. We got grandchildren now. I mean, and uh, that was I would say that that certainly was first and foremost my wife and my kids. Now, day in day out, did that it always look like that? No, and I won't lie to anybody. I mean, Stryker was a very demanding company, and we had a lot of things we had to get done. But what I tried to do, Omar, I tried when I was at Stryker. I was at Stryker, and I was all on the Stryker. When I was home, it was the family and the kids, but I also I really tried to encourage this to the point that we made time for all our associates there at Stryker to take care of themselves. So we had a program there. We brought in a kind of a physical training group that came in, ran, did walking programs and running programs, and we paid for guys to the couch to the 5Ks and these types of things, but very, very intentional, not just kind of we really and gave people time to be able to do these kinds of things, because I thought it was, if you don't feel good and you're drinking, or you're doing, eating a lot of bad food and all this kind of stuff, you can't do a great job with your family. You can't do a great job with your job. And so I would I put an hour of time in every day to do something. And then we had these programs. We'd have these like at lunchtime and so on. So if we'd have programs, and I'd jump in there with the rest of the folks to say, hey, okay, well, if he can do it, then it's okay for me to do it. And so that's kind of what was our philosophy there, was, take care of yourself, take care of your family. You do those things, and come in here and take care of your work.
Isn't that such a joke? That's such a joke. There's no such thing. It's just one life. Right?
Well, it's dangerous because if you don't feel good and you're not taking care of yourself, it just impacts all the rest of it, including your job. So I don't know. I think you can in a 24-hour day. I think you can find a 45 minutes to an hour of time to take care of yourself.
No, absolutely. And these things, I mean, they compound on themselves over time. And I could tell, speaking to you, that you've done that, and it shows. The way you look, your energy level, and everything. On the opposite end, though, I've talked to people who I know are younger than you, and they look terrible, they sound terrible, and it's because like all these little bad habits accumulate over time. It's like, oh, I'm on the road, not going to work out. I'm going to eat, fast food, bad, snacks here and there. I'm going to drink Coca-Cola, all these things, and it adds up. Oh, absolutely. I tell people all the time. I said, when I hear I don't have time, I tell them, like, I want you to audit what you're doing every hour. If I audit your time, I guarantee I'll find the time, because you're doing something that is a waste of time. So Jim, I want to ask you a couple more questions just about your time as president, and then we're going to get into sort of the final segment, which is we can call it rapid fire question, except luckily for you, I did a post on LinkedIn. For those who are listening, you can click in the notes below. You'll see the post. But, I think thousands of people have seen it at this point, because it was posted yesterday. But a lot of people from Stryker were, not only asking you questions. So I have those questions marked. I can't ask everybody's question, but I'm asking the best ones. But also some people shared some great stories about you in the comments and sent directly to me. So I'll share those. But here's the question I want to ask you. And you may not like this, but this is a question that the people are going to want to know. So to the best of your ability, when you joined Stryker, not when you joined Stryker, when you took over as president in 2008 of the instruments division, you took the revenue from 1.2 million to 1.8, not million. Sorry. Let me correct, billion with a B.
It was actually a little less than that, but no. Anyway, it wasn't quite a billion yet, but yeah.
No, I'll go with that. That's even better. So little less than $1 billion. And let me correct myself. You guys probably did 1.2 million like every minute, maybe. But a little less than $1 billion in revenue in 2008. And by the time you left in 2017, you had surpassed 1.8 billion. So for those listening, just for context, that's well above a 50% increase. And when you're playing at that level of the game at a public company, making things move that high with that much money is very, very difficult. It's not just enough like, hey, we're going to get better at selling. What did you do the first, year? What did you identify? And what levers did you pull to start getting the organization moving in that direction?
I almost got fired my first year.
Oh my God. We got to cover that story. Let's hear this. Why did we have to wait an hour for this story to come out?
So it was because, yeah, so it was, no, it was what, no, it was no, it was '08. I took over in September of '08. Yeah, and then it was the financial. You're going through the Great Recession right there at '08, '09, and hospitals were really, really clamping down on capital and at that time. So it was not maybe the greatest time to step into the role. And uh, in May of 2009, the FDA did a massive audit of Stryker instruments, and I'll just say they put us on double secret probation. If you remember from Animal House,
Oh, I do.
we were in really.
So Dean Wormer came in and put you on double secret probation. Got it.
Dean Wormer came in, and we were in really rough shape. So we had the recession, the Great Recession, and we had to end all of our R&D projects, or put all our R&D projects on hold, with the exception of our system. I think it was 6 at that time. System 6 power tools. That's the only thing we did, because we had to do all this remediation. And I'm not. I mean, this is just reality. I'm not. I'm not playing the violin for myself. That's what happened, and it was nobody. We took the position that it was nobody's fault, but it was everybody's responsibility to fix it, and that collectively we were going to get this thing done. So we were, for all intents and purposes, Omar, in '09, we were flat, and probably lucky to be flat, and then in 10, things started to shift a little bit. We started getting a little bit ahead of some of these issues we had with the FDA, and ultimately the team and a fellow by the name of Mike Baca, who was our quality regulatory guy, and a host of others. I'm fast forwarding here, because I think it was in 2012, Mike gave one of the keynote addresses at the FDA convention about how to remediate and how to turn a really bad situation into something that became kind of a model. So that's the good news. But back then, in '09.
And what was that gentleman's name? Mike?
Mike Baca, Baca. He's a retired, he's a wonderful guy, and there was many others that were involved in that, but Mike was kind of Mike and a guy named Brent Lalamia were kind of two guys that were really spearheading that whole thing. But so it was a little rocky in the beginning, but we kind of got back on track, and I think people believed that we were very transparent. We told them when things were going good, and we told them when things were not going well. There were a lot of people that were scared, but we kind of we rallied the troops, so to speak, and as an executive team, we got out in front of it, and I personally, and all our executive team, we took the worst phone call. I mean, people who were upset because they couldn't get their products and all this kind of stuff, we sent them right to us, and we talked to them. And I'm not sure we made them feel any better, but we weren't going to just have everybody else catching the arrows for this kind of thing. And we eventually kind of pulled out of it, and it got things back on track, and and we had such a wonderful sales organization and marketing organization, and those guys were real troopers and fought through it, and they had such great, so many of those folks had such great relationships with their customers that they were able to get us through some of these issues that we were having. So
You're missing something, though. What did you do that almost got you fired?
Well, the CEO of the company was looking at with flat revenues, a FDA audit that was maybe one of the worst in the history of the corporation. He was really questioning whether or not I was up to the task, and thankfully, my dear friend and boss, who happened to also be a All-American offensive lineman at Notre Dame, did what he did so well at Notre Dame, which was to protect the quarterback. He protected me from getting shot, I think. So he was phenomenal.
What's his name?
Tim Scannell. He just retired as the chief operating officer. Just a phenomenal guy, and he was. Tim, he never told me the story, but I know for a fact that he took a couple shots to the helmet for dear old Jim.
Hey, everybody needs somebody like that in their corner.
Well, that's also the sign of a great boss too.
Yeah, I remember early in my career when I was at Missouri Robotics, so a couple names that the audience will, at least from my world, they'll recognize. So Chris Prentice was the CEO of Missouri's U.S. division, and Chris Sells was the VP of sales. And I just started my career, and I was a young guy in my 20s, so there was all kinds of dumb things I did, and unknowingly, but I was, I- like I was like a baby deer on ice. And so there was a period of 2 weeks where I almost got fired, where one week, I can't even remember what exactly I did, but one week, Sells was trying to calm Prentice down from firing me. And then the following week, Prentice, I think, was trying to calm Chris Sells down and preventing him from firing me too. So there was a period where that almost happened. Had it happened in the same week, I think that would have been the end of my med device career, and we would not be having this conversation. Luckily, it's spaced out though, you know. Well, after you guys got, sort of dug yourselves out of that hole. So now we're talking in like 2013, 2014. What were the levels you started to pull to gain that commercial traction and start boosting the revenue like that? Because again, you did that in a very short time. What were some of the strategic things that occurred?
Well, we were able to unleash the product development pipeline. We were able to get some new products into the mix that were real game changers for us. The whole idea for instruments, our we wanted to own the OR for in an orthopedic case. We wanted to have we had these space suits. We had some personal protection stuff, the power tools, all of the everything that the nurse and the doctor needed. We wanted to be able to give to them in kind of one nice, neat little package. And so our R&D teams and our marketing teams did a wonderful job of really accelerating a lot of that type of thing, and then those things, and then we just had an outstanding sales group that just was able to they keep their customers or win back their customers in places where people had just felt like we were failing them, and that helped us to get back on track with as a division that had a tradition of doing pretty well.
Do you feel, and it was something I was covering earlier this week. I have a bias that when it comes to, and actually somebody, they sent this is actually one of the questions. They asked me, and then I was like, I'll ask Jim as well. Do you feel that when it comes to getting your commercial traction, the first thing you have to solve is not going and getting new customers? It's getting back the customers that, that either turned you away or they're not utilizing as much, and then turning around bad accounts. Because I told this individual that you have to do that first, because there's only so many customers you can go get. At some point, that problem of why customers are not using you and why they're pissed is going to rear its head, and you got to fix that first. Would you agree with that?
Yep. We had something in our commons area, Omar. We call it the Instruments Way, and it was a roadmap. It was basically our strategic plan on just one board, and it was the Instruments Way, which was, if you asked anybody at Instruments, what does the Instruments Way means? It means that no matter what happens, we are going to provide an outstanding experience to our customers every day. And everybody was part of that. Every single person that worked there was part of that, who was part of the Instruments Way. And so that was really our purpose, our mission, and we based it off our values of what the things that were important to us. And but that's what we tried to do. We tried to we a lot of times companies have a tendency to get very internally focused, and we're going to come up with all this cool stuff, and then here you go, and then the customer goes, well, that's not really what I want. I mean, so we really tried, and it's difficult, but you have to keep reminding yourself that you got to put the customer at the center of everything you do, and then work your way backwards into the company. And we brought customers into Stryker Instruments. We had them talk about their experiences with us. why they believed in us, different experiences they had. And it just brought the customer back to everybody who was either making hand pieces or in the development process, or whatever they were doing, and get them in contact with why we do what we do every day.
No, I completely agree, and I think that's the harder thing to do, because it's, even me as an entrepreneur with my own business, it's very tempting to come up with a new product, and I have to constantly remind myself that the product that I have right now is far from perfect. People love it. It's far from perfect. So how do I make it better? How do I deliver value faster? Those kind of things. When you mentioned that that you guys essentially unleashed, specific product lines, what was the workhorse of that product line that was the main domino that made everything else go?
Neptune.
What is Neptune?
It was called Neptune. It was a waste management system, which doesn't sound very sexy.
Really?
It's not very sexy, but it's not very.
Yeah, no, it doesn't sound. That's like a Warren Buffett lever. I like that. Okay.
Not very sexy, but I'm telling you, it solves a massive problem. And
so what's the problem it solves, and how did you guys figure out, hey, we should do waste management?
well, we had a tremendous long tenured development guy, good friend of mine named Matt Alves, and he was the one that located this. It was a product that was being made in California, and it had a lot of flaws, but the basic idea of being able to collect all the stuff that happens during surgery, which is blood and fluids and so on and so forth, and put it into a container in a very safe environment, and keep that away from the patients and the hospital staff, and then be able to dispose of it in a very clean manner is a big deal, because a lot of these things, you get these little kick buckets, and that's what happens. People kick them, and the stuff's all over the floor. Anyway, so it's not a great dinner conversation, but that product took over power tools, and
Wow.
it exceeded power tools.
How, what was it? I mean, there's qualitative and quantitative data that led that insight to be discovered. Like, do you remember, or do you know, like, what exactly did you guys see? Because again, this is around, I believe it's 2012 or 2013 that you're referring. Yeah, so you just got out of this hole with the FDA and with 2008 2009's recession, so you're ready to go with what you guys have. Come up with things that are sexy technology or anything. So waste management, like, again, it's a far cry from that. What did you guys see qualitatively and quantitatively in the data that made you say, like, we should invest? This is the bet we should make.
Well, it was that, but we really liked products in the instruments business that had a stream of disposables that went along with that. So it was kind of a razor blade kind of business. So hey, we put we put an expensive power tool in Dr. So and so's hands here. Well, that's great, and that's a one-time sale, but every single case he's putting a blade into that, which is a high precision blade that costs, or a drill bit, or these plastic disposable, one-time sterile plastic disposables. And Neptune had a stream of those kinds of disposables too. So that playbook worked well for us. That they had to put kind of the Trojan horse in there, but to have all these ancillary products that went along with that, and then again, slowly but surely, try to make it simple for the nurses, so that they know they could do it. They could go to Stryker, and they could get really good prices to take care of all of their needs in that OR for doing orthopedic surgery with just our guy could come in there and set them up, and it was just kind of easy peasy, or at least we told ourselves it was easy peasy. But it was that was really the philosophy there.
And do you feel like, you provided something of value that solved a big problem for the customer, and that allowed you to sort of turn around some of these like accounts that were not so good, customers that were not happy, and then get that second chance that allowed the instrument line to sort of take off? Would you say that was the lever?
Yeah, and then we because we have so many different divisions, Omar, we did try as best as possible to partner with our other divisions and try to again provide a better value package for our customers that they could again encapsulate kind of everything they need, the sports med side, the joint side, et cetera, that you could do one-stop shopping with us. And it didn't work all the time that way because salespeople sometimes get very independent and very territorial. But we were able to make that work as well.
That's fantastic. I got a couple more questions, and then we're gonna wrap up with the rapid fire. And I appreciate you spending this much time with us on a Friday. I have a strong belief that after this episode publishes, I'm probably going to get some messages for you to do a live stream with me. So, there's a first time for everything. This is a great year for you. 2022 podcast, live streaming. By end of the year, you might be on TikTok. Who knows? I mean,
oh boy. I'm not sure if I know how to get on TikTok, but anyway. Yeah.
I don't recommend it. So the last bit of questions. So something I do have to ask you about is that, in 2012, 2013, Stryker made a massive transformational acquisition, not a bolt-on acquisition to core. And that was the acquisition of Mako, right? And so Mako, I think, was trading around $11, $12 a share. Stryker acquired it for $30. So it was a big acquisition. But even I remember that the integration of that technology, it was painful because for any organization, that's very difficult, very difficult. But Stryker made it work, and Mako's doing amazing right now. What were the main lessons that you learned from that you would advise a CEO like a Jeff Martha or Kevin Lobo or any of these CEOs of these massive blue chip companies when they're going to make an investment in acquiring a transformational technology like that? What were the lessons you guys learned?
Well, Kevin was the one that made it. Kevin has been very aggressive in terms of acquisitions. When Stryker was evolving, and most of the time I was there, we were more of an organic growth kind of company through our product development group, and then John Brown bought Helmetica back in 1999, I think 98 or 99, and doubled the size of the company because we were in that kind of that precarious position of being a mid-sized orthopedic company. When John bought Helmetica, then we became a major player. But to get to your point here, Mako. Actually, I have a Mako knee. I had a Mako knee done in October, so eventually everybody becomes a Stryker customer, I guess. But
thank God, not a Zimmer.
It was and it is fantastic technology. It is, a guy of my age, 10 years ago, knowing what I know in the industry, I would have never had my knee done, total knee done. I'm in my mid 60s, and but I had it done, and I just.
What made the integration so messy and hard, by the way? Because I even heard about it in my world.
It's high tech. Yeah, I tell you, Omar, I can't tell you all of the, because it was a different division. I can't tell you all of the pitfalls, but I know that the technology was very different. You had this, and you have these orthopods who have been doing conventional knees and hips for forever and ever. And listen, I know I've got, I'm written up in the orthopedic journals and everything. I don't need a robot. That's not that, blah, 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 blah. So there was this whole mindset thing of, do I really need a robot? And then the joint guys were saying, well, maybe we'll just give them the robot and then we'll, and see if they use it. Well, a lot of those became coat hangers in operating rooms instead of. So there was this whole idea of, how do we sell it? The joint guys are really good at selling joints. That's not a joint. That's a robot. That is what you sold. I mean, it's a very different, big ticket capital item, and it was a very, it just they're two separate things. And so, do we get to have a Mako sales force, and do we have to go hand in hand with our orthopedic total joint sales force? And so there was a lot of that stuff that was going on, and really trying to understand the technology and where it was going, because the Mako that we bought and the Mako it is today are very, very, very different. But I'm telling you, for me, it's the way to. And I had it done. It's the way to go. I had it done in outpatient surgery. I went in at 7:30. I was home at 12:30.
That's amazing. That's amazing. And it sounds like the big lesson is that when you make these transformational acquisitions, it's not just you acquire it and you bolt it on. Like, you have to be ready to really invest to figure out not only the technology, how do we fit that to what our core business does, but how do we sell it? How do we train for it? It's like all that comes with it. And
Yes, sir.
think the mistake that companies make, and I'm not going to name certain companies, but certain companies who acquire robots, I think they have this concept that, like, we're going to acquire this business and it's going to take us to the next level, without thinking we need to invest a lot of money and time integrating it and making it work within our business model, because it's a different business model at that point,
Yeah, and convincing, as convincing somebody that $1 million acquisition is worth it.
Exactly. No, exactly. That's exactly right. We're gonna wrap up your time here at Stryker, and then we're gonna get right into the rapid fire. But in your retirement, what would you say the most valuable lesson you learned? Which I know there's many, but like what are some big things that kind of come to mind as you're retired and you kind of reflect back on your time as president of the division?
And I think I mentioned this to you before. And you look back and as you're in these leadership roles, and that is the value of surrounding yourself with great people, and people who are super smart, that are willing to challenge convention, that are willing to challenge you, that you can put together a team that will challenge one another for the greater good, that you can disagree without being disagreeable. Those kinds of things. The value of that, I think, is super important. And I told the guys when the first day that I took over the job, and I replaced a super smart guy who was the CFO. They moved into the CFO role, corporate CFO role, and just really, really good guy, brilliant guy. But everybody kind of looked down at him, to make all the decisions. And I said, I want to tell you guys, if you're going to look down at the end of the table and think that I'm going to make all the decisions, I would tell you that's a leap of faith, because that's not going to happen. We are going to figure out, how to do this thing, and we're going to figure it out collectively. And we're not always going to agree, but at the end of it, we're going to put our hands in the middle of the table. We're all going to say break, and that's the path we're going to take. And I think I appreciate the fact that I was blessed to have such a great group of people around me every day that I loved dearly, and I trusted, and they trusted. They put their trust in me, and when we had tough times, we were able to get through them. And I think that it was a lot of fun.
Fantastic. Yeah, and you're definitely coming back on the show, because there's so many more questions I can ask you. But we're gonna, I want to be mindful of your time, even though you're tired and taking it easy. You're having a blast with me on Friday. We're gonna get into the rapid fire. So I'm gonna ask you these questions from LinkedIn, and I unfortunately can't ask you all of them because there's a lot of questions. which is why you're gonna be a return guest. So let's start with the first one, and this is actually somebody who was the catalyst to me reaching out to you, which is my good friend Brian Knop, who had interacted with you from Texas. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, sure. I know Brian. Mm-hmm.
So yeah, great guy. So he sells capital in those, selling the drill division that you mentioned. So he, of course, says, Jim's had a tremendous and positive impact on my career in medical device and marketing. My question for Jim, when you think about some of the most difficult environmental business challenges you faced as a leader at Stryker, what was your approach to keeping everyone engaged and motivated?
Being honest and open with them, telling them exactly what was happening, blaming nobody in the process, and saying and getting everybody on board to being able to fix it. And that it was really energizing when we had our both the FDA issue, we had another FDA issue after that, and these were kind of big tough challenges, but we stayed out in front of it. We didn't go in and hide underneath our desk and hope for the best. We got out in front of these things, and we were very honest and open with people, and we kept asking them, what else do you think we should be doing? Where are we missing? Where are there things we're missing here that because we're going to get re-audited. So that was helpful, and I think that's what got us through it. And we just kept giving them updates, both the good updates and the not so good updates.
Got it. And very, very sound advice. And again, I think that's important, as you mentioned before in the interview, about making people feel valued, and also like just shooting straight with them, because people know when you're not.
People, Omar, people can handle bad news. They can't handle no news, and they can't handle BS. That's a problem. And if you start BS and people lying, I'm telling you what, you're cooked.
I totally agree with that. It's good marriage advice too, by the way. All right, next question. This is from Justin Morrison. This is actually a pretty good one. So Justin's he helps medical device reps, but I think he's a rep himself. His question is: in your medtech career, what are 2 to 3 qualities that you've seen consistently in the most successful reps? 2 to 3 qualities in the most successful reps that you often see.
Their service commitment, I think, is the best ones have an unparalleled service commitment, and they also have. I think the other ones are they're great problem solvers. They can build great relationships. They build trust, kind of like we just talked about. They build trust, and they can get people to they live up to their word, and I think it's those things right there. You do what you say you're going to do, and you handle the tough stuff. People will continue to work with you.
No, absolutely. Very good ones. This one, Beth Whitten, who's a clinical sales specialist, she's the one who asked this very interesting question that you liked, which is, what's something that most people get wrong about you? That's a good one.
I think some people see me and I'm fairly fit, and they think maybe that I'm really fast, and I'm not on the bike. But I think from a professional standpoint that I don't know. I mean, maybe some people's perception of a person who's in a president or CEO roles is kind of hard charger and kind of look at me type guy. And I mean I'm generalizing here, and that's not me. I got hit with a lucky stick, and I was given an opportunity, and I had the good fortune of having a lot of really good people around me, and it worked. So I mean, I've never. That's not comfortable for me, is to be the the hard charger or the guy in the spotlight type person.
Well, before I get to the next question, perfect shout out, and again, I'm reading from my phone here. Caleb Lohman, who's he's sales training manager at Stryker Interventional, he left a comment and said, I met Jim my first day at Stryker while he was the divisional president. He introduced himself as Jim, asked about my background, and we chatted about our families for a few minutes. When he walked away, my new manager came up and said, "Do you know who that was?" And I said, "Yeah, that was Jim. No idea what his job is, but seems like a great guy." So,
That's good. That's what you want.
oh, and you know what? Mike Baca actually commented. He said, worked with and for Jim for 7 years, hands down one of the best leaders I've ever known. I'm looking for my next question, but I'm getting a lot of. So Brian Lee, who's a U.S. sales director. Yeah, I'll never forget the president's breakfast with Jim. Being in a suit and tie at 6 to 7 a.m. came quickly after celebrating all night, but getting time with Jim and hearing him speak meant so much to us. An incredible leader, but an even better man. Looking forward to listening to this one.
Great. That's a great part of the Stryker sales culture. That President's Breakfast. John Brown started way back when he took over as the CEO. It's a wonderful experience. That's the place you want to be. That's for sure.
Oh, absolutely. I'll tell you, because I haven't checked the comments in here for like a couple hours, and you go to look at these. If you can, Jim, I would go and like all of these comments, because people are. If you can see this, people are writing. These are paragraph long comments. There's no question. They're just talking about the impact you had on them, and I think that really says a lot about you as a leader. So while I'm looking, there's one other question I want to ask, but while I do that. Books are something that everybody keeps asking about. You and I, we developed a friendship over books. And again, the other day when we met virtually for the first time, the first 15, 20 minutes was talking shop, sharing what I do and what you're up to in retirement. And then the next 40 minutes, we just talked about books. What are some great books you can recommend to people, whether it's business or life or history?
I don't read many business books anymore, Omar. Just
Most of them are fluff.
I don't. But the ones. But I like to read books about people who have actually done something. I mean, done something rather than follow these 7 things or this kind of Brian had mentioned American Icon, which is the Alan Mulally story at Ford. I think it's a phenomenal book about a guy who really changed the culture the right way at one. And then the one I talked to you about, Net Positive, with Paul Pullman, which is relatively new, but he took over for Unilever. The board took a big chance on his approach, but it was about engagement and sustainability and collaboration, and things were, for a big multinational conglomerate like that, were just you didn't really even hear about those things, or they were nice to put in the annual report, but this guy did it, and it's I think that's a really good one. And I mean the good old First Break All the Rules, the Gallup book, I think is still one of the best ones, especially for new managers. I told you Team Arrivals and Truman. You didn't tell them, Omar, that those are 2 bricks. They're doorstops. I mean, there's 750 to 800 pages, but they are 2 of the best.
Yeah. For those who are on the road, they're good. They're good for on audiobooks, right? They're good as audiobook. Yeah, they are great books.
They're great. And the Splendid and the Vile, the book, which is Eric Larson book, which is much more readable and not as long, on Winston Churchill's management of the bombing of Britain, is phenomenal. Terrific book. And so yeah, those are kind of the ones that I think. But if you want a good real live thriller, spy thriller, the one I told you about the other day, The Spy and the Traitor.
I just got that one.
By a guy named McIntyre is unbelievable. Oh my gosh, that's a great book, and it's true. It's not made up.
Yeah. I'll tell you what's interesting, Jim, is that like, especially for the young marketers, they always ask me like, what books should I read? You know, I have some marketing books I recommend, but I'll tell you what, as a business leader, what really developed me and took me to another level was reading books on history and psychology. And especially in history, I mean, you know, if you want to learn about what you do in a tough situation, don't read a book about, oh, like we're not going to hit our revenue this quarter. Read a book when it's like somebody is invading our country, and if we don't stop them, they're going to they're going to wipe out our culture. Read a book about that, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Like including the one that you recommended to me, which everybody has to read, Man's Search for Meaning. You know, Viktor Frankl is a psychologist. He was in
Unbelievable.
in a Nazi concentration camp in Auschwitz, and found meaning and fulfillment in a Nazi concentration camp. So if you hate your job, trust me, you can learn from this gentleman who wrote a book about finding fulfillment in a Nazi concentration camp.
But it's 140 pages, maybe.
And it's short. Yeah, it's a short book. You know, it will change your life if you let it. So last two questions, and these will be quick. And again, what a great episode. So my second to last question to you is Dylan Crotty. He's the current president of.
Oh yeah, wonderful guy.
Yeah, current president of Stryker Instruments. So he's your successor. So what is your advice to him as he's taking over, and kind of similar shoes as you, because you know you took over when the country was in a recession, a lot of problems are happening. Right now we're in inflation and recession. According to the White House today, though, they've redefined what that means, but let's just assume that we are in a recession right now. What's your advice to him during these sort of tough times as a leader?
Well, I know Dylan very, very well, and I can tell you what he is doing, which is, you know, he's a guy that reaches out to his peer group, and he stays close to his people, both his internal team as well as the external team, and he is. And stays close to his customers, and they really he's a guy that's got great focus on taking care of the customer and taking care of his folks. And I know that sounds kind of simplistic, or there's got to be some sort of formula, but that's really is the formula. The formula is you take care of your people, you take care of your customers, you take care of your people, and you constantly you're in constant communication with what you're doing and so on, and you get through the difficult times. And Dylan's excellent at that. They've got the way that the new building is set up. I mean, it's super accessible for people, and they got little coffee shops and so on in there, and so he's constantly out there with his people and interacting with them, and has a real good pulse on the business.
It's fantastic, and fantastic to hear that as well. So last question for you, and this is going to be a very simple question, but not an easy one. So my question to you is, let's imagine for the next year, in every city across the United States, I take out a billboard. And along with that, since we live in the digital age, everybody gets a notification on their phone too. And that when they drive to work, when they're headed to the hospital, headed into the headquarters, waking up on their phone, on this billboard, there's one message that they're going to see every day for the next year. And this is all the whole medtech industry. What message do you put on there, and why?
To the medtech industry.
To the medtech industry, so sales reps, marketing managers. I'll make it more simple. Just like, let's just focus it on the sales people, sales reps.
Yeah. Take care of your customers. Take care of your customers, because The thing about that, I think the one of the great things about being in this particular industry, Omar, is that the person who is on the surgical is on the table, could be your wife, your mother, child, loved one, great friend, and that's a tremendous responsibility for all of us that we have to be able to and we have to take very, very seriously that everything we do, could very much impact that person who's on the surgical table. So just take care of your customers, and life is good.
Fantastic. I can't think of a better way to wrap up. Jim, it's been such an honor and a pleasure to have you on the show. For those listening, again, if you're a physician listening to this, check the notes below. You can claim a CME credit by submitting your reflection. Again, I've made them all free now. Jim is on LinkedIn, so make sure you follow him. He's gonna be posting more. And if you worked with Jim or Jim had some kind of impact on your life, check the notes below or go to my profile, look for the post we made about Jim, and leave a comment about how he impacted your life. Jim, thank you so much for joining the show. Stay on for.
Thank you very much.
Absolutely, pleasure. Stay on for just a second as I wrap up.
Thank you for listening to another episode of The State of MedTech. I'm your host, Omar Khateeb. Do us a favor, if you like this episode, share with somebody, and go ahead on Apple and Spotify, wherever you are, leave a 5-star review, type a few nice notes about us. This is how we get other people to find the show. Thank you, and we'll see you next time.